Hey everyone, my name is Austin, and welcome back to another episode of the Unfiltered Faith Podcast. If this is your first time here, I want to thank you for tuning in. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the narrative of John 9 and the difference between spiritual blindness and physical blindness, along with its many forms: cognitive, emotional, and cultural. These concepts are not just theological ideas, they are tangible realities that affect our lives and communities every single day. He will also be exploring the ego and its role in spiritual blindness. So if you're someone who likes to take notes, I encourage you to do so. And while you're at it, have your Bibles out. And I encourage you to read John 9 on your own time. So what exactly is spiritual blindness? Spiritual blindness refers to a lack of awareness or understanding of spiritual truths. Spiritual blindness may sound heavy, but it's something that we can relate to, whether we realize it or not. It's that feeling of being lost, of not being able to see the bigger picture. It's the inability to see God's working in our lives, in the world around us. And here's the thing, it's much harder to recognize because it often resides in our hearts and minds, unnoticed until we encounter moments of clarity or awakening. The theological implications of spiritual blindness are profound. They challenge us to think about the nature of faith and how we engage with the world. We're going to explore how we can lift those blinders and open our eyes to the beauty and the truth that surrounds us. Let's start with a simple question. Have you ever felt you were moving through life in a fog? Maybe you're going through the motions, waking up, going to work, completing daily tasks, but deep down, you feel disconnected or unsure about about your purpose. That is often referred to as spiritual blindness. Spiritual blindness can manifest in many ways. It can be a lack of awareness of our inner struggles, an inability to see the blessings in our lives, or even a disconnection from God. It can be caused by life's challenges, disappointments, or even our doubts and fears. In John 9, we encounter a powerful story of a man born blind who receives sight through the miraculous works of Jesus. This moment is not just about the physical act of seeing. It's a profound metaphor for spiritual awakening. Let's start by unpacking the difference between physical blindness and spiritual blindness. Physical blindness is a condition we can see and understand. It affects the senses and can be addressed with medical intervention or support. But spiritual blindness, that's a little more complex. If there's one thing you take away from today's episode, it's this. Spiritual blindness is from Satan himself. Satan doesn't want anything to do with you. Satan doesn't care about you. Satan wants to kill your faith. And that's how he cripples the God in you. If he's not actively pursuing you, you are living exactly how he wants you to. Satan and his influence are so powerful that he was able to take 1/3 of the angels in heaven with them down to hell. Are we merely passive observers or active participants in the divine narrative unfolding around us? In John 9, the blind man's healing wasn't just about his physical sight, but an awakening to a new reality. This transformation was met with skepticism and criticism from the religious leaders of the time, who were ironically spiritually blind. They couldn't see the miracle before them because they were fixated on their understandings and traditions. This brings us to the crucial point. Spiritual blindness can also affect our perception of God's work. We may have preconceived notions of how God should act or what miracles should look like. When we confine our understanding to these boxes, we risk missing out on God's extraordinary ways at work. Now let's think about this for a moment. How often have we found ourselves in situations where we don't see what's right in front of us? Perhaps it's a relationship that needs healing, a purpose we're meant to pursue, or even the beauty of grace surrounding us. Like the blind man in John 9, many of us may be walking around begging for sight, but unaware of our spiritual blindness. In our communities, spiritual blindness can manifest in many various ways. It may show up as judgment towards others, a lack of compassion, or even indifference in the struggles those around us face. We might find ourselves caught in routines, going through the motions of faith without truly engaging with its depths and significance. So, how do we begin to shift this narrative? How do we support those suffering from spiritual blindness? The first step is awareness. We must cultivate an environment where we can openly discuss our struggles, doubts, and questions. It's essential to create safe spaces within our communities, small groups, a church gathering, or even a simple coffee catch up with friends, where vulnerability is welcomed. We often find that others are grappling with similar issues when we share our stories. This shared journey can lead to a mutual support and encouragement. Next, we need to foster a culture of compassion. Just as Jesus approached the blind man with kindness and understanding, we too must approach those around us with love. Instead of judging or dismissing, we should seek to understand, ask questions, listen actively, and offer help in tangible ways. As we reflect on these themes, let's also consider actionable ways to nurture our spiritual side. First, engage with Scripture. The Word of God is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. Spend time in the Gospels, absorbing the teachings of Jesus. Let His Word challenge, inspire, and open your eyes to the new revelations. Secondly, practice prayer. Prayer is not just a routine, it's a conversation with the Creator. In moments of prayer, we can ask for clarity and understanding. We can seek God's guidance in revealing the areas of our lives where we might be spiritually blind. Lastly, embrace community. Surround yourself with people who inspire you to grow in faith. Share your journey with others, seek mentorship, and offer support. Remember, none of us are meant to walk this path alone. Take a moment and reflect on your own life. Are there areas where you feel blinded? Perhaps you've been caught in the chaos of everyday life. Or maybe you're facing a significant challenge that's clouded your vision. Acknowledge that feeling. It's okay to admit it. Now let's talk about the antidote to spiritual blindness. First step in overcoming this state of awareness is awareness. Being aware of our blindness is essential. It's like being in a dark room and realizing we can turn on the light. Once we acknowledge our blindness, we can begin to seek the light. So how do we seek that light? One powerful way is through prayer and meditation. These practices let us quiet our minds, connect with our hearts, and open our spirits to God. When we still our thoughts and focus on our breath, we create a space for clarity and insight. As we continue to explore this topic, let's consider the role of community. Surrounding ourselves with support and loving individuals can help us see things from new perspectives. When we share our struggles and victories with others, we gain insight and remind ourselves that we are not alone in our journeys. Think about your circle of friends or family. Who can you reach out to when you feel spiritually blind? Who can you lean on for support? Building and nurturing those relationships is important because they can help us navigate through the fog and regain our vision. And let's not forget the importance of Scripture and spiritual literature. Many of us may turn to religious texts, inspirational books, or even podcasts like this one to find guidance and wisdom. These resources can be a beacon of light, helping us see beyond our current circumstances. As we continue our discussion, let's talk about forgiveness. Spiritual blindness can often stem from past hurts, resentments, and grudges that we hold on to. When we carry the weight of these emotions, it can cloud our vision and prevent us from seeing the goodness in ourselves and others. Forgiveness is a powerful tool that can help us clear that fog. It doesn't mean we condone the actions of others or that we forget the hurt. Rather, it means we're choosing to release our grip on the pain and allow ourselves to heal. I encourage you to think about someone who you may need to forgive. Someone else or even yourself. What steps can you take to let go of that burden? The journey towards spiritual clarity is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We must be gentle with ourselves as we navigate with the ups and downs. Remember, even the most enlightened individuals have moments of doubt and confusion. It's part of being human. But in those moments, we can lean into our practices, prayer, community, gratitude, and forgiveness to guide us back to the light. Now, spiritual blindness is something that can affect anyone, regardless of their background or belief system. That subtle, sometimes insidious barrier keeps us from seeing the world and ourselves. There are different types of spiritual blindness. Let's start with emotional blindness. This type of spiritual blindness occurs when we become disconnected from our feelings and the feelings of those around us. Picture someone who's been through a traumatic experience. They might build emotional walls to protect themselves, but in doing so, they might also shut out positive emotions like joy, love, and compassion. In today's world, we see this in individuals who refuse to confront their emotional struggles, leading to broken relationships and communities. Moving on, we have cognitive blindness. This is the inability to see beyond our own beliefs and perspectives. Cognitive bias can warp our understanding of reality. We often gravitate towards information that confirm our pre-existing beliefs, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. One historical example is how the church viewed science during the Middle Ages. The belief that the earth was the center of the universe blinded many intellectuals to the groundbreaking work of scientists like Copernicus and Galileo. Fast forward to today, and you see similar patterns in how people engage with news and social media. We tend to seek sources that echo our views, and creating echo chambers that limit our cognitive growth. I encourage you to engage with news and social media outlets that don't align with your beliefs. I encourage you all to do this to grow your cognitive abilities. You don't have to believe what they're saying, but at least you've exposed yourself to ideas you may not have thought of before. As a people, we are so stuck in our ways that sometimes we fail to consider other options and other perspectives. And that in itself is a form of cognitive blindness. Let's step out of our bubbles. Let's challenge our minds in the way we think. Because if we're not challenging our minds in the way we think, we're not strengthening our minds. And our minds are the most powerful tool we have to combat sin. I see this a lot in politics. When it comes to politics, we all have areas of cognitive blindness or confirmation bias. What would happen if we had a let's agree to disagree mindset instead of a I'm right and you're wrong mindset? My friends, that's called ego. And lastly, let's address cultural blindness. This form of spiritual blindness stems from the societal norms and values we are raised with. Culture shapes our worldview, often leading us to uphold biases and prejudices consciously. Historically, cultures have oppressed groups based on race, gender, and religion, usually justified by a distorted understanding of faith. Think about the Salem witch trials or the Crusades, events driven by cultural norms that blinded societies to compassion and justice. In today's world, cultural blindness manifests in systems. In today's world, cultural blindness manifests in systemic racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination that continues to divide us. So how can we combat these forms of spiritual blindness? How can we enhance our spiritual awareness and intuition? First, let's talk about mindfulness. Being present at the moment allows us to connect with our emotions and those around us. Try daily meditation or simply take a moment to breathe deeply and reflect. This practice cultivates awareness and opens the door to deeper understanding. Next, consider journaling. Writing about your thoughts and feelings can help clarify your beliefs and biases. It's a powerful tool for self-reflection that can reveal patterns of emotional and cognitive blindness. Another technique is engaging in active listening. When we truly listen to others without judgment or an agenda, we gain new perspectives and deepen our understanding. This practice can break down the barriers created by cognitive and cultural bias. And let's not forget about community. Surrounding ourselves with diverse voices and experiences can challenge our worldview and promote spiritual growth. Seek out conversations with people who think differently than you. You may be surprised by what you learn, but understanding its role in our spiritual development is crucial. In simple terms, our ego is the part of us that identifies with the thoughts, beliefs, and experiences. It's how we perceive ourselves about the world around us. While the ego can help us navigate through life, it can also cloud our judgment and perception, leading us into spiritual blindness. Ego says, I'm too full of myself to be hungry for Jesus. Let's take a moment to think about this. Have you ever encountered a situation where your beliefs seemed so clear that someone else saw it entirely differently? Or perhaps you felt very confident about your spiritual journey, only to realize a little later that you had missed some vital truths. This is where the ego steps in, creating a barrier that can distort our understanding and connection with Jesus. You see, the ego thrives on certainty. It craves validation and often resists anything that might challenge its established beliefs. This is where spiritual blindness can creep in. When we are overly attached to our egos, we may find ourselves trapped in a bubble of self righteousness, unable to see the broader picture of spiritual truth. We can become so consumed by our narratives that we fail to recognize the wisdom and perspectives beyond our own. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but for those that don't know, about 8 months ago, I was rushed into the hospital because I almost contracted sepsis. I looked very malnourished. I had lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks, and the doctor told me that I was about a week from death. A person thinks a lot about his life after experiencing a traumatic event. Since this experience, it's been much easier for me to slow down and think. I often have moments of solitude. I have learned a lot about myself in the past 8 months. There are some really good things and some things I can work on. For example, something I can work on. My world has to be completely torn to shreds before I get that wake up call that something needs to change. I feel like God had to metaphorically smack me in the face before I finally listened to him. He's been teaching me to slow down for the past 8 months. I was in that hospital for 16 days. A lot of those hours I spent alone, and I had no choice but to listen to God and what he had to tell me. Ego kills relationships. Your ego is the number one killer of relationships. It doesn't matter if it's platonic or romantic. Ego won't let you see what you've done wrong. Ego makes you believe that everyone else is wrong. Relationships are hard. If friendships are difficult, I can't even imagine how difficult it is to be in a romantic one. Actually, I know how hard romantic relationships are because I've been in a few, and I'd still be in those relationships if it weren't for my own ego. We often tend to self-sabotage ourselves in our relationships because we get scared. Because perhaps the idea of lowering our ego to raise someone else's is hard. Relationships are all about sacrificing our wants, needs, and desires for someone else's wants, needs, and desires. Your ego knows how to protect, reject, and deflect. It doesn't know how to connect. And you need connections in that relationship for it to thrive. The ego is like a parasite. It latches onto anything and everything. If you keep feeding it, it gets bigger and bigger. But if you starve it, it'll eventually die. Apologizing doesn't necessarily mean you admit that you're wrong and the other person is right. It just means you value your relationship more than your ego. Now let's dig deeper into the concept of spiritual bypassing. This term describes a phenomenon where individuals use spiritual beliefs and practices to avoid addressing emotional pain, trauma, or unresolved issues. It's like putting a shiny spiritual veneer over a deep wound, hoping it will somehow heal itself. The danger here is that spiritual bypassing can lead to spiritual blindness, as we may convince ourselves that we are on a higher path while neglecting the foundational work that truly supports our growth. Imagine a beautiful tree that stands tall and strong. Its branches reach for the heavens, and its leaves shimmer in the sunlight. But if the roots are weak and ungrounded, that tree is susceptible to storms and can easily topple over. In the same way, if we ignore our emotional and psychological roots, he can become spiritually imbalanced, relying solely on surface level spirituality to navigate our lives. So, how does the ego contribute to this? The ego often tells us that we need to be better or more enlightened, creating a hierarchy in our spiritual journeys. That this can lead to a false sense of superiority over others struggling or questioning their path. When we are defining our worth by spiritual accomplishments, we risk excluding ourselves from the beauty in the human experience, the joys, the struggles, the growth that comes from being authentically vulnerable. The irony is that true spiritual growth often occurs when we allow ourselves to be imperfect, to embrace our flaws and challenges. In those moments of vulnerability, we can shed the layer of ego and begin to see the world through a lens of compassion and understanding. This is where we can start dismantling spiritual bypassing and face the truth that may be hiding beneath the surface. Now let's discuss some practical ways to recognize and transcend the ego's grip on our spiritual journeys. First, cultivate self-awareness is essential. Take time to reflect on your thoughts, beliefs, and reactions. Ask yourself, is my ego speaking or is it my true self? Journaling can be a powerful tool here. Write down your thoughts and feelings and observe any patterns that arise. This practice can help you identify when your ego is in the driver's seat. Next, embrace humility. Remember that we are all on different paths. No one is more in line than another. We can learn from everyone we meet, whether they are seasonal spiritual seekers or those just beginning their journey. Instead of seeking validation, open yourselves up to wisdom of listening to others. Engage in conversations with an open heart and allow yourselves to be challenged and inspired by different perspectives. Moreover, practice mindfulness. Mindfulness allows us to observe our thoughts without judgment. When we create space between ourselves and our ego-driven thoughts, we can start to see them where they are. Temporary and often misguided perceptions. Engage in mindfulness practices such as meditation or deep breathing to ground yourself and connect with your true essence. Lastly, seek out community. Surround yourself with like-minded individuals who encourage authenticity and vulnerability. Share your experiences, fear, and triumphs without the fear of judgment. Vulnerability is a powerful antidote to ego. We create a safe space for growth and healing when we come together in the spirit of support. As we peel back the layer of ego and spiritual bypassing, we open ourselves up to a deeper connection with Jesus. We start to see the sacred in the mundane, the beauty in our struggles, and the lessons in our challenges. Spiritual blindness fades, and we become more attuned to the whispers of our souls. Remember, our spiritual journeys are not linear. They're filled with twists and turns, moments of clarity, and times of confusion. It's okay to feel lost or uncertain. Embrace those moments as opportunities for growth. Allow yourself to be a student of life and know that every experience, whether joyful or painful, is a stepping stone towards greater understanding. As we navigate this winding path of self-discovery, we inevitably encounter moments that challenge us and ask us to confront uncomfortable truths. So let's start with the question. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase? First, let's talk about why we often avoid uncomfortable truths. It's a natural human instinct to seek comfort and safety. We're wired to protect ourselves from pain, disappointment, and conflict. But what if I told you that avoiding these truths often lead to more pain in the long run? When we ignore what's uncomfortable, we create barriers in our relationships, limit our personal growth, and hinder our spiritual journeys. It's like putting on blinders to the world around us. We might feel safe for a moment, but eventually those blinders become a prison. So, how do we begin to face these uncomfortable truths? Here are a few strategies I've found helpful on my journey, and I hope they resonate with you as well. The first step is to acknowledge your feelings. It's essential to recognize that feeling uncomfortable is part of being human. Permit yourself to feel what you're feeling. Sit with those emotions for a moment, whether it's fear, anxiety, anger, or sadness. Reflect on why these feelings are arising and what they may be trying to teach you. By acknowledging your feelings, you create space for understanding and healing. It's like shining a light on a shadowy corner of your mind. Instead of running away, you're choosing to face it head on. The second strategy is to seek support. Facing uncomfortable truths doesn't have to be a solo endeavor. Reach out to trusted friends, family members, or mentors who can provide guidance and encouragement. Sometimes talking about what's bothering you can help lighten the load. Consider joining a community or support group where you can share your experiences and hear from others navigating similar challenges. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Vulnerability is a strength, and sharing your truth can foster deeper connections with others. Next, let's talk about embracing the discomfort. This might seem counterintuitive, but allowing yourself to sit in your discomfort can lead to profound insights. Instead of avoiding situations that make you uneasy, try leaning into them. This can mean having that tough conversation you've been putting off, addressing your fears, or even confronting societal issues that weigh on your heart. Embracing discomfort allows you to break free from the chains of avoidance and step into your authentic selves. Now let's reflect on your values. When you come face to face with uncomfortable truths, it's important to ground yourself in your core values. What truly matters to you? What do you stand for? You create a strong foundation for navigating discomfort. His alignment can give you the courage to face hard truths and make necessary changes in your life. Finally, let's talk about action. Once you've acknowledged your feelings, sought support, embraced discomfort, and reflected on your values, it's time to take action. Change doesn't happen overnight. Small steps can lead to significant transformation. Consider setting specific goals that align with the truths you've uncovered. Whether committing to an open communication in your relationship, engaging in community service, or addressing personal habits, taking action is a powerful way to reclaim your narrative. I encourage each of you to take a moment to reflect on your spiritual insight. Have you identified any areas in your life where you may feel a sense of spiritual blindness? It could be a great time to seek out experiences that offer fresh perspectives. Let's not forget the inspiring story of the man in John 9. He didn't just regain his sight, he also became a witness to a miraculous event, which led others to encounter Jesus. Similarly, when we attain spiritual clarity, we can share that light with those around us. I sincerely hope our conversation today has ignited a desire within you to delve deeper into your faith and support those who may be grappling with spiritual blindness. It's a challenge we all encounter, but it also presents an opportunity for growth and transformation. So let's look beyond our current circumstances and acknowledge Jesus' presence in our life. As we wrap up today's episode, I encourage you to ponder your own experiences with spiritual blindness and consider addressing any emotional barriers that may be hindering your spiritual growth. Are there cognitive biases that could be limiting your understanding? And how might cultural influences be shaping your beliefs? I want to encourage you to embrace the uncomfortable truths in your life. Challenge yourself to face them head on. Remember, the process may be difficult, but the rewards are immeasurable. Let's remember that spiritual growth is an ongoing journey that requires us to be vulnerable, open, and willing to confront our limitations. Thank you for joining me on the Unfiltered Faith Podcast. If you like today's episode, please share it with your friends and family to help spread the message of awareness and growth. I invite you to contemplate your relationship with ego and spiritual blindness. Are there areas in your life where you may be experiencing spiritual bypassing? How can you free yourself from the constraints of ego and embrace a more authentic expression of your spiritual life? Let's always remember that spirituality is not about perfection. It's about connection. Connection to ourselves, others, and God. By embracing our unfiltered, authentic selves, He can shine a light on the shadows of ego and spiritual blindness, paving the way for profound growth and transformation. Thank you once again for joining me on today on the Unfiltered Faith Podcast. Let's keep seeking those fresh perspectives, and let's keep having those unfiltered conversations that give us just a little more understanding of the world around us.